Let's start with number 10. The Iron Wolf Bite. A slow gnawing torture. The Iron Wolf Bite was a brutal clamp shaped like the jaws of a wolf, forged by Viking blacksmiths to mimic the bite force of the predator that symbolized ferocity and death. Victims were restrained while the open jaws were placed around a limb, most often the forearm, calf, or shoulder. Once locked, the jaws were tightened using a screw mechanism or wedges, driving serrated iron teeth deeper into the flesh. The torture was intentionally slow. Vikings tightened the bite in small intervals, sometimes every hour, allowing the victim to feel rising arcs of pain as blood flow decreased and nerves tore. The pressure caused bruising, then punctures, and finally crushed muscle tissue. Over time, the limb went numb, swelling grotesquely as circulation collapsed. Pain came in waves, sharp when the bite tightened, burning when blood pooled, and throbbing as tissue died. Some Viking torturers heated the iron before applying it, causing horrific blistering beneath the wolf-shaped jaws. Others left the victim chained overnight, letting frostbite work alongside the crushing pressure. Because the wolf was deeply symbolic in Norse myth, associated with Fenrir and Ragnarok, the torture carried spiritual terror as well. Victims believed they were being consumed by a metal embodiment of chaos itself. The Iron Wolf Bite rarely killed outright. Instead, it slowly destroyed the limb, leaving the victim crippled, broken, and psychologically shattered. It was a torture designed not only to injure the body, but to devour the spirit. 9. The Rib Spreader. Slowly opening the chest while the blood eagle is the most famous chest-related torture. A lesser-known but equally horrifying Viking tool was the rib spreader. Similar to primitive surgical retractors, this metal or wooden device was placed between two ribs after a small incision. Once inserted, the operator turned a crank or lever that gradually widened the gap between ribs. The spreading was done slowly, sometimes over hours, creating a uniquely excruciating pressure pain. As the ribs were pried apart, nerves stretched, cartilage cracked, and the lung pressed painfully against newly displaced bone. The victim struggled to breathe. Each breath felt like a blade sliding across the chest cavity. The device was also used on prisoners meant to reveal important information, as the gradual expansion left them conscious but increasingly desperate. Vikings often combined the rib spreader with exposure. Victims were left half-tied, half propped up so their chest forced each breath to move painfully against the widened ribs. Sometimes water was dripped onto the wound to intensify the sting. Other times, smoke was fanned into the opening, causing violent coughing that worsened the pain tenfold. The rib spreader proved the Vikings were not only strong warriors, but also cruel innovators. It was not a theatrical execution tool. It was a slow-suffering machine, designed to keep the victim alive long enough to experience every stage of the pain. For those who survived the initial spreading, infections and internal bleeding ensured a prolonged, agonizing end. 8. The Flamebox Helmet. Fire and smoke torture. The Flamebox helmet was a wooden or metal helmet fixed tightly on the victim's head, with small holes drilled near the top. Inside the helmet, Vikings placed burning embers, oily rags, or smoldering herbs. The holes allowed enough oxygen to keep the material burning, but not enough for flames to escape, turning the helmet into a slow-cooking torture chamber around the victim's skull. As heat built up, the metal or wood grew hotter, transferring scorching temperature directly to the scalp. Hair sizzled, skin blistered, and sweat evaporated instantly. Victims tried to scream, but the helmet muffled their cries, making the torture eerily quiet. If smoke filled the interior faster than air escaped, victims experienced choking fits. Every breath became a mix of ash and burning fumes. Some helmets contained runic engravings representing fire giants like Surtur, adding psychological terror to the suffering. The torture was slow by design. The embers did not kill quickly, but they inflicted intense, localized pain. Victims often fainted, only to be revived by the heat when consciousness returned. Torturers could prolong or accelerate the process by adding more embers through the top port. Sometimes, the helmet was removed before death, leaving the victim disfigured and marked forever as a warning. 7. The fishhook restraints. Flesh tearing with every movement. The fishhook restraint system used large, forged Viking hooks, similar to those used for hauling massive fish or whales. Instead of ropes or chains, these hooks were driven lightly into the victim's shoulders, back, thighs, or arms. The hooks didn't stab deep enough to kill, but deep enough that any movement caused tearing pain. Victims were then suspended or anchored in a semi-standing position. The torture relied on the victim's own struggle. Every attempt to shift weight, breathe deeply, or adjust caused the skin to rip slowly. The hooks prevented rest. The body was forced into constant micro-movements that pulled fresh wounds open. The slow nature of the pain made this method especially cruel. Unlike knives or blades, which cut quickly, hooks stretched the flesh first, then tore it, causing long, dragging agony. Blood loss was slow, and victims often remained conscious for many hours. In warmer seasons, flies laid eggs in the exposed flesh, compounding the torment. This method was common during coastal raids. Vikings used the hooks to punish captured sailors, forcing them to stand helplessly with metal teeth embedded in their skin. Many prisoners screamed until their voices broke, but the hooks allowed the torture to last frighteningly long without immediate death. The fishhook restraints were a perfect embodiment of Viking brutality. Simple tools, devastating results, and pain delivered slowly, tear by tear. 6. The salted rope binding, burning, cutting, and swelling. The salted rope binding inflicted pain through pressure, abrasion, and chemical burning simultaneously. Vikings tied victims with thick, coarse ropes soaked in seawater or pure salt. Once secured around the wrists, ankles, torso, or neck, the ropes were pulled tight enough to bite into the skin. As minutes passed, the combination of restricted blood flow and abrasive fibers caused intense burning sensations. The salt acted like sandpaper and acid, turning small scratches into searing wounds. Every movement caused the rope to grind deeper, embedding salty fibers into raw skin and triggering sharp, stinging pain. Vikings often placed victims in stress positions while bound, forced kneeling, sitting on their heels, or squatting against a wall. As muscles fatigued, the rope tightened further, cutting circulation and causing limbs to swell painfully. The swelling made the ropes dig in deeper, creating a cycle of slow, escalating agony. Some captors poured salt water directly onto the bindings, making the ropes shrink and constrict even more. This could turn a mild abrasion into a deep, burning groove within hours. The victim's skin often peeled away in strips when the ropes were removed. Salted rope binding was a psychological weapon as well. Victims knew that struggling only made the pain worse, trapping them in a state of helpless immobility. It was a torture of slow erosion, pain delivered not in violent bursts, but in relentless, grinding waves. 5. The hot iron cage. Slow-burning confinement. The hot iron cage was a crude metal frame shaped to fit a human body. Victims were locked inside the cage, which was then placed near a fire or suspended above glowing coals. Unlike direct burning, this method heated the cage slowly, forcing the victim to feel the temperature rise degree by agonizing degree. As the metal warmed, it began to scorch the skin on any point of contact. Victims instinctively pressed away from one bar, only to sear themselves on another. The cage created a rotating pattern of pain, first tolerable warmth, then unbearable heat, then blistering agony. Skin sizzled and stuck to the iron. When victims tried to pull away, patches of flesh tore off, exposing raw tissue. Smoke and heat caused dehydration and dizziness. Vikings sometimes used this torture for confessions, gradually increasing heat whenever the victim hesitated. Because the cage heated unevenly, victims never knew where the next spike of pain would strike. The psychological cruelty was immense. Victims watched the coals glowing beneath them, knowing the heat would keep rising. Some cages were designed with spikes inside that grew hotter than the frame, turning accidental contact into sudden bursts of white-hot pain. The hot iron cage rarely killed quickly. Victims often survived for many hours as the heat cooked the outer layers of skin. It was a torture designed for slow, inevitable agony, the kind that left even hardened warriors begging for mercy. 4. The drowning trough. Water torture without quick death. Unlike simple drowning, the Viking drowning trough was designed to kill slowly. It was a shallow wooden basin filled with seawater or icy river water. The victim was tied face down above the trough with their head hanging just inches above the surface. Each time their neck muscles weakened, their face dipped into the water, triggering panic. But because the water was shallow, the victim couldn't simply drown at once. They inhaled small amounts repeatedly, coughing and choking while still being forced to breathe. The repeated near-drowning episodes caused slow oxygen deprivation, chest pain, and overwhelming terror. Cold water amplified the suffering. The shock of icy liquid hitting the face and lungs made breathing painful. Vikings often timed the drops manually, pushing the victim's head down for a few seconds, then lifting it just enough to keep them alive. This cycle could continue for hours. Salt water caused additional agony when inhaled, burning the throat and lungs. Victims vomited repeatedly, but the position prevented them from clearing their airway fully, causing more panic and choking. The drowning trough didn't rely on blades, heat, or physical force. It weaponized fear, exhaustion, and the instinct for survival. Victims died slowly, usually from a combination of shock, hypothermia, and fluid-filled lungs. It was one of the Vikings' most psychologically devastating tortures, slow, intimate, and relentless. 3. The Stoneweight harness. Crushing the body 1 pound at a time, the Stoneweight harness was a torture that relied on slow, incremental pressure. Vikings strapped victims into a leather harness fitted with loops. Into these loops, executioners placed stones, beginning with small pebbles and gradually adding heavier rocks. Each new stone shifted the victim's posture and increased strain on the spine, abdomen, and legs. The gradual nature of the torture made it especially cruel. At first, the weight caused mild discomfort, but as the hours passed and more stones were added, the body began to sag painfully. Muscles trembled under the load, ribs pressed inward, and the diaphragm struggled to move. Breathing became shallow and strained. When victims fell to their knees, the harness forced weight onto their chest, compressing their lungs. If they collapsed entirely, the stones pinned them down, pressing them painfully into the ground. Vikings sometimes placed the harness outdoors, letting cold weather tighten muscles and intensify the suffering. Other times, captors positioned victims under the sun, letting heat exhaustion accelerate the torment. The harness allowed fine control over the pace of agony. Torturers could pause, wait, or add stones one by one, stretching the suffering over hours or days. The method rarely resulted in quick death. Instead, it slowly crushed the victim emotionally and physically. By the time the victim succumbed, they had endured relentless, suffocating pressure. 2. The Ashen foot rack. Slow burning, without flames. The Ashen foot rack was a unique Viking torture technique targeting the feet, a sensitive area filled with nerves. The victim was tied with their legs extended, and their bare feet were placed on a wooden platform. Hot ashes, not flames or coals, were placed beneath the platform, heating it slowly from below. Because ashes hold heat for long periods, the temperature climbed gradually. At first, victims felt a mild warmth, but within minutes, The heat intensified into a burning sensation that penetrated deep into the soles. Unlike fire, which burns quickly, ash radiates steady, lingering heat that causes deep tissue damage without destroying the outer skin too rapidly. Victims struggled to pull their feet away, but the restraints kept them immobilized. The slow heating created layers of pain, tingling, burning, blistering, and finally nerve destruction. Vikings prolonged the torture by periodically raking the ashes, ensuring consistent heat. The Ashen foot rack was used for interrogations or punishments where the Vikings wanted the victim to survive, at least initially. Even after the torture ended, victims were often left unable to walk, their nerve endings permanently damaged. 1. The Thornstake seat, sitting on pain itself. The Thornstake seat was a wooden bench studded with sharpened stakes or large thorns. Victims were forced to sit on it with their hands tied behind their backs, preventing them from shifting weight. Any attempt to adjust their posture drove the stakes deeper into their thighs, buttocks, and lower back. The agony wasn't immediate. At first, the thorns barely broke the skin, but as minutes turned to hours, gravity slowly forced the victim's weight downward, embedding the spikes deeper. Blood trickled gradually, soaking the seat. Muscles cramped from immobility, worsening the pain as the victim struggled not to move. Yet every tiny movement caused a fresh burst of agony. Some versions included heated stakes or metal spikes, adding burning pain to the stabbing sensation. Others were used outdoors, exposing victims to insects and the elements. The torture could last for many hours, leaving victims in a state of ongoing, escalating misery. The Thornstake seat showcased how Vikings transformed something as simple as sitting into a slow, unbearable ordeal. It was designed for endurance torture, pain that grew worse not by force, but by time itself.